but I wanted to talk a little bit about getting started in publishing, because you said you were 5 years with HarperCollins
Yeah.
before you began working with your book publisher now. So how do you get started in publishing? How do you break in?
Well, basically you give up your entire life and move to New York. Yeah, it was kind of a dream of mine to work in children's books, but for most of my youth, I thought it was basically an impossible thing. Like there's no, like who actually does this? Certainly not me. So I had I after college, I had a very normal set of jobs, marketing and such things. But I did go to get a master's degree in children's literature, thinking maybe I can do this. So basically, I quit my very stable job at like 26 years old and took my husband away from his very stable job here in Maryland, and we moved to Brooklyn. And I took 2 non-paid internships at Bloomsbury and Penguin and hoped for the best. So luckily it turned out well, and I got the job at HarperCollins within like 2 months after that, and worked my way up from the bottom. I mean, I only ever in the 5 years was, an assistant editor. At that point, I had my first child, and I realized I wanted to sort of do different things. And then the opportunity to work at this new company, this book packaging company, came up, and it was wonderful because they were like, "Hey, do you want to keep making children's books and do it from home?" Because they are headquartered in England, and they wanted to have some American editors. So that's how that all started, and I've been doing that for part-time for 10 years. So it was a really amazing experience because I got to work at a publisher and really see books from that perspective, which is very different than I think you see things as a writer. And then at the book packager that I work at now, it's kind of like being a giant Borg writer with lots of other people, because we're not publishers. We do sell to publishers as well, but we work as a team. We work as a group, like a hive mind, and come up with all kinds of different ideas. And so that really has taught me how to make writing more of a, when I say a job, I feel like it makes it sound like it's boring, but it made me be very disciplined and organized about writing stories in a way that I never was before. And it also broadened my horizons of all the different kinds of stories that I could write, because I wasn't really sure for a long time what my voice was or what my genre was. And trying out so many different things all the time for work is a really good way of seeing what you like. And so it's been a really interesting adventure. I'll say that.
Had you always wanted to be an author, or was it, I want to be an editor and then I can work on all the books, and then while you were doing it, you're like, I keep reading these books that other people wrote. Nah, get out of here. Let me write one.
No, I always wanted to be an author, but I think, I wanted to be, I turned my attention to pursuing editing because I thought I need a stable job that I can do all the time that I like. And at the time I had been working in marketing, like I said, or, working at continuing education. And I was just like, I don't want to do this. And so I thought, hey, I'll go and I'll be an editor. And that, I think for a long time through being an editor, I just kind of didn't believe that I could cut it as a writer. I just didn't think I had I always wanted to since I was a child, but at that point as an adult, I think I didn't have the confidence to think that I could do it. And it wasn't until a lot of these other experiences that I got to the point where I was like, I don't know why I thought that. Like, I can definitely do this. I've been doing it. So it was really all in my own head. you know. And I mean, honestly, the connections that I made everywhere that I worked and everywhere, that's what made everything possible. So I'm a firm believer in, you know, taking risks and following patterns. So like everything that I did was always something that at the time I thought was completely nuts. And then it always inevitably led to something else that was great. And because I just jumped right in, you know. So yeah, it's an interesting journey for sure.
So interesting that that you had the confidence. I assume because you just won the lottery, but you had the confidence to quit your job, convince your husband to quit your job, which lets me know that if you decide to be in sales, watch out. You're obviously very convincing, and you moved to New York without a job that you have. Just to get in the market with the confidence that somehow you're going to make that happen, and yet still lacking the confidence that you could be an author.
Yeah, it's weird. I tell it to my therapist all the time. What's going on? No, I think you know, I really put the idea of being an author on an enormous pedestal, and I mean, I think I still do. I mean, I'm like amazed right now, you know, that this is even happening. I really just had such immense respect for just it as a career and people who do it. And so it took me a long time to be able to get there, you know. And I think everything that happened along the way was, you know, the education that I needed to be able to do what I've been doing.
Had you always wanted to be an author, or did you figure that out somewhere along the way?
I was the same way. I was nodding so much when Michelle was just saying all of that, because I was exactly the same way. And I was the same way in that I wanted to write books, but I mean, and I talk about this when I do school visits with kids, like, you know, I would see the names on books and I'd be like, you know, oh, this must be, you know, some robot person or someone who lives in a cloud or lives in some kind of special place or has some kind of special power, because it couldn't have been me. I couldn't be the same kind of person where I could have my name on a book. I didn't meet the first time. I think it's fantastic that they've got all of these author visits now for kids. I grew up all over the world. I was born in South America. I grew up in England, and we moved to Jamaica when I was 10 and Cayman Islands when I was 12. So I was kind of all over the place. And especially, you know, when I was the age that I really was kind of figuring out that, you know, this is really what I wanted to do and dreaming about my future, I was in a small Caribbean island and definitely didn't meet any, you know, authors or have any idea that this could ever be on, you know, on something that I could do on my horizon. But when I went to college, and the same thing, Michelle, when you were talking about doing something practical, you know, I wanted to, and at that point, actually, I kind of wanted to act. I basically wanted to do anything with story, you know. I wanted to write and I wanted to act. I just wanted to do things with stories. Stories were where it was at for me. And so when I went to college, my parents, to their absolute wisdom, suggested that I do a degree in journalism instead of, you know, theater. And I ended up doing a double degree, 2 degrees, one in 2 bachelors, one in mass communications, journalism, and one in theater. Only because I had so many electives.
No way. I had a double major in theater and English.
Really?
Wow.
Same thing. So, see, it's like we're twins. We're just twins.
I know. This is all kismet.
That's right. So I did that degree, and that was my job. Like, I was working actually in a newspaper before I started college in Cayman, in the Caymanian Compass. They helped to sponsor me in college, which was amazing, a great opportunity. And so then after that, I stayed in journalism. But when I went to college, and funnily enough, not in my theater degree, but in my journalism degree, one of my journalism professors, Rick Wilbur, who is actually in my acknowledgements for The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, because he encouraged me a lot. And I just got his latest book. He was the first author I had ever met. And he still writes sci-fi books, and he had written some sci-fi books, and I told him that I wanted to be an author one day, and he goes, "Oh, I'm an author." And he actually shared a literary agent with Orson Scott Card, and we had to interview someone, and I said that I would like to interview Orson Scott Card because I'm a huge Ender's Game fan, and he got me this interview with Orson Scott Card when I was in college, and that started to make me think that if my college professor could be an author, then maybe, possibly I could. But even then I was thinking that I had to be an author in adult books, even though I wanted to write, kids books. And then I ended up, had this career in journalism, and I ended up kind of, just because of the way the jobs were available, I ended up shuffling more into editing. My husband and I went to LA. He does visual effects. So when we were living in LA, for him doing visual effects, and I was working with a sister publication to Variety, which was for home entertainment, called Video Business. So I was working there. But in my spare time, I figured, when in Rome, I'm in LA, I should be focusing on writing screenplays. So the whole time that we lived in LA, I wrote screenplays. I think I ended up writing about 6 of them. By the time I'd written the 6th one, the protagonists were getting, younger and younger, and I was realizing more that I wanted to write children's stories. And the final one I read, there was a book called Story by Robert McKee. That's really good. You got it? There it is.
Up there on the shelf.
Good. It's so good, isn't it, Rob? I love that book. It's so good. So in that book, he talks about writing a treatment, and there's an exercise that you can do. And I'm all up for, I'll try anything. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll give it a try. So he talked about writing a treatment for a screenplay and writing no dialogue, just the entire story out. So this is like, I think, the 6th screenplay that I was working on. I wrote this big treatment for this story, and it was middle grade. I didn't really know what middle grade was at that time, but the story was middle grade. And I wrote all of this out. It was like 30 pages, this entire story. And when I got time to actually turn it into a screenplay, like that Robert McKee had talked about, I realized that I had more fun writing that treatment than I had writing the screenplays. And I was finally getting to the point where I was figuring out how to write screenplays, because it's a very different kind of, technique. And but I realized that I really just wanted to write novels, because writing the treatment, that's pretty much what I was doing. I mean, it's a very short novel, 30 pages, but that's what I was doing. So that ended up becoming the first novel that I wrote. And it almost got an agent. It was quite close, but I had a lot of learning to do. By the time I actually signed with my agent with the book that became The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, The Boy, the Boat, the Beast was the 3rd novel I wrote. But by the time I signed with my agent, I had written 6 novels, and I would write a novel, revise it, get it as far as I could. Then I would write another novel, learn from that, go back to The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, revise it more, and just kept doing that. And then finally, I finally was in a good enough place where I signed with my agent, and then it sold to Simon & Schuster. But yeah, so but I was the same way, as Michelle. I never really thought that I would actually get there. I used to go around calling The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast my weird little book. And when it finally sold, the art director at Simon & Schuster, Laurent Lynn, who I'd known previously through the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, he's like, "Sam, you got to stop calling it that." But it kind of was my weird little book. And, yeah. Now 3 books out, so it's still really surreal to me, but pretty amazing. It's an amazing industry. And I mentor writers now, and I always tell them, if I can do this, you can do this. It's not easy, it's hard work, It's, you know, a lot of work to get that, to really understand how stories work. That was, I think, one of the biggest learning curves. But everything that I did, all the journalism, and Michelle, it's probably the same for you, like that journalism part and learning screenplays, all of that helped me to become the novelist that I am today, you know.
You have said the magic word for me. If I were to swear allegiance to a religious text, which to date I've decided not to, but if I were, it would be Story by Robert McKee. I teach it in every fiction workshop. I hit my 4 students over the head with a lot of his sayings, like just internalize this and you'll figure out the rest. Just first McKee, then everything else is going to be fine. I tell them it's like going to the rainforest and taking ayahuasca, but you can do it in your home with your Kindle or on an audiobook, and it will open up an entire world for you to see once you get there.